35-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, welcome in one and all to another episode of the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and Joes. It's Trey Reeves, it's Gary Attorney coming to you live on your drive time on the freeway, coming home, whatever you might be listening to us. If it's live, if it's on your commute home, like an old timey shock jock, if it's Monday morning on your podcast feed, wherever you might be, we're glad you're joining in. Garrett, we survived Ice-Mageddon round one. I think we're just getting cold temperatures this weekend. No frozen precipitation, at least in my part of the state. How you holding up? Have you been able to venture out, get back to work, all that good stuff?
I'm telling you, man, like when it comes down and it actually freezes here in Texas, we have issues. We can't be normal people here in Texas when there's ice on the ground. How do you even operate? It's so bizarre. I got a nice several days off of work, which was, kind of fun. You get to spend time with your daughter and your wife and get to hang out a little bit. Not so much fun coming back to work and finding out there's a pipe that burst and has ruined several sections of your building. That's not necessarily the most fun part of your job when you come back to work, but I digress. That's not necessarily important. The good thing is, right, and I've teased it coming out of the national championship game, recap. I said that we're entering the long, dark, cold off season. And I was starting to think for a second, I really actually cursed us to long, dark, and cold for a second. I was a little bit concerned. I was like, oh no, I didn't realize the off season was going to be this long, dark, and cold. Fortunately, we're back. Everything's fine. We're here on your drive time. The roads have more or less melted at this point here in the DFW area, and we can get back to talking about college football.
Absolutely. And we know that's not the case for everybody. If you're listening to us on the East Coast or in the deep South, Georgia, I think, is getting hit pretty hard tomorrow. Thinking about you guys, praying for you, staying in our thoughts and prayers for sure. But yeah, you're right. We did survive our iteration. Shout out ERCOT, by the way, the unsung heroes last week. They did so much surprisingly
good job.
They take so much crap in their Facebook comments every single time they have the audacity to post anything after 2021. And hey, they did their job. And they're kind of like a referee in college football, right? Like if I don't know your name, that means you're fantastic. If I'm not thinking about ERCOT, hey, that means they're doing a fantastic job. So shout out to all the grid people.
ERCOT and their popularity is kind of like cornerback popularity, right? If you don't hear a corner's name all game, that means you put the guy on the island, right? And that's what you need ERCOT to do. You need to put the power grid on the island. Nobody's thinking about it. It's just constant supply of power. That's what you need.
Absolutely. Well, hey, it is the off season officially, but that's just on the field. We don't have an off season on this show. We are coming to you. We did take a little break. We appreciate the time off to reset, kind of get our bearings for what we want the next few months of content to look like. But we'll be coming to your feed at least once a week from now until this summer when we start to ramp things back up again in preparation for the 2026 season. That's kind of where we're starting today, was starting our offseason coverage with, I guess, the first big milestone of the offseason. That's the transfer portal. We're going to give you our full recap, give you some superlatives, some winners, some losers, some sleeper classes, all that good stuff coming up in just a few minutes. But Garrett, we did have some breaking news, late breaking news, I guess, over the past couple of weeks that we want to get started with, starting with the college football playoff, because it's late January. Of course, we're going to be talking about the college football playoff. And no, of course, we can't talk about games on the field that just happened. We're going to talk about already next year. So to summarize, if you haven't heard already, we are staying at 12 for 2026. It's going to look just a little bit different. There are going to be a couple new wrinkles. All Power 4 conferences will be getting an auto bid regardless of their ranking. So ACC champ, Big 12 champ, SEC, and Big 10 all in, regardless of where they're ranked or not ranked in the final top 25 poll from the committee. Notre Dame is going to get an auto bid if they are ranked in the top 12 of the final top 25. And the top ranked G6 team, Garrett, will get in. And the wrinkle here is it no longer has to be a conference champion. And Chris Vanini reported a couple days ago that even some G6 leaders were kind of surprised by that wrinkle. They did not know that that was coming. So there will still be a G6, I guess officially a G6 auto bid. That never was the case. It never was a G6, as we saw this year with 2 of them getting in. It's now officially a G6 auto bid, and it does not have to be a conference champion. So all that wrapped up into one question here. Are we happy with this? Are we happy with this new 12-team field staying at 12, but with these new wrinkles? How are we feeling?
Staying at 12 is good. Like let's give them their props for that. Staying at 12 is a good thing. We need to do everything we can to stop the spread of the college football playoff, right? If it takes 2 weeks to slow the spread, we'll do it if we need to, right? We need to do anything we can. If we just get 2 seasons of 12 teams, like that's great. But what we really need to focus on, I think, is kind of some of the revisionism that I think that they're engaging in right now, where they're saying, okay, so all Power 4 conference champs get an auto bid. Well, you said it was the 4 highest ranked. You just assumed when you made the rules it was going to be the Power 4 teams. Lo and behold, that's a harder thing to do because that's busted twice. Like you proof of concept yourself out. You prove that what you thought was going to happen didn't happen. And it's actually probably better for the game that you got, Boise a couple years ago and you got, you get James Madison getting to travel up to Oregon. Yeah, I get it. Like they weren't that competitive. Okay, sure, fine, whatever. But that wasn't the point, right? The point was to give everybody a chance to earn it. And when you get, Duke winning the conference and they don't have any wins, and that's just no good for what the situation is in college football. So I think that's kind of a problem. And, you're looking at, again, the all Power 4 conference champs getting the auto bid. That feels like, okay, sure, whatever. Hopefully the Big 12 and the ACC continue to keep up with what's going on with the SEC and the Big 10. Top ranked G6 team, I guess that's fine. Obviously I'd prefer that they have more opportunities through conference championships and winning their way in instead of it being kind of, beauty pageant with what the committee thinks. And that's especially true for Notre Dame. We get to just kind of beauty pageant Notre Dame in if we think that they should be. That's pretty volatile, right? I feel like that's kind of something that is going to be controversial going forward. The way that Notre Dame gets to schedule things versus the way that other people are going to get to schedule things is going to be a topic of conversation, right? Do you punish, like say that you take like an Ole Miss team, right? And they play an out of conference Big 10. Do you punish Ole Miss for playing the Big 10 out of conference and not winning as much through seeding, where, maybe Notre Dame doesn't play as many, big time, Big 10 or big time SEC teams? All of a sudden they're getting a better showing, they're getting a better seeding just because we beauty pageanted them into the playoff. I don't know what that looks like. There's lots of questions, obviously, that we're not going to be able to answer until we're there. I don't like the way that they changed the criteria, but I love that we're staying at 12.
Yeah, I think that's well said there at the end. I love that we're staying at 12. It's truly a do the ends justify the means situation for sure. I'm going to pull up the bracket. I tweeted this out a couple, I guess last week when this news broke, but here is what the bracket would have looked like this year. So it's largely the same, right? But the two major changes that you'll notice are Notre Dame is in at the 10 spot. That's in place of Miami, who Miami, of course, famously beat Notre Dame head to head on the field.
And also made the championship game.
And also made the championship. Yeah. So that's a big change. And then Duke would be in place of James Madison on the grounds of winning the ACC. That's notable because Duke lost to a group of 16 in the regular season this year in Tulane. So very, very interesting just how this would have played out in practicality this year. Now, I think it's dangerous to talk about that because I think we've made a lot of assumptions. You hinted at this, Garrett. We've made a lot of assumptions on how these rules would play out, right? Like we all just assumed that the top 5 conference champions would be Power 4 and 1 G5 or G6. That obviously doesn't always happen. There's always the outlier, right? Where you're just going to assume that Notre Dame is in the top 12 most years. And if they're kind of borderline and it would look bad, maybe the committee drops them to 13 and just, doesn't want to play that game. We can assume that, right? We can play that dangerous assumption game. But in 2 years of this 12-team playoff, the assumptions have just been dumped on their head time and time again. So I'm hesitant to say that those assumptions are going to play out. But what I do think, I actually, I guess, semi-hot take about this, I actually like the auto bids. I like that all 4 of these conference champions, power conferences, are going to be represented. I think long-term, that's really good for the health of college football, that every team can look at that and say, hey, I have something to play for going into the season. There's a clear path for me to get into the college football playoff. And I think that that's good for the long-term health of college football. If we get into this thing where 98% of the other conferences only have access to like 2 spots, I think that's really bad. So I like that there's a clear path for everybody. I do hate it for the G6 teams, though. I hate that every time that they kind of beat the system that's rigged against them, the system just changes to become more rigged against them. So I really hate that. I know we have a sizable G6 contingent that watches our show, and I really do feel for you guys. That's a really rough go of it, because I know that you guys don't largely want to separate. You don't want it to be Division 1A and Division 1 AA again or something like that. So yeah, long-winded way of saying I'm happy we're staying at 12. Don't really have a problem with the auto bids, but I hate the collateral damage of losing the G6, kind of beating the rig system against them. Want to throw this at you real quick, Garrett, before we move on to our next topic. This was from Brett McMurphy yesterday, Thursday. So he tweeted that all 10 conferences and Notre Dame wanted expansion, but the Big Ten and SEC, and he's quoting an anonymous source here, quote, wrestled power away and have now fumbled the opportunity to expand because they can't work together because of their egos. So a couple years ago, the other leagues signed over the power to the Big Ten and SEC, essentially. Now it's 2 egos. It's Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, and they just cannot come to an agreement on what this should look like for the future. My question to you out of this, Garrett, is, are they really just like, they're obviously both want to be the alpha, but is that kind of just both screwing themselves in the long run, that they can't find a way to work together?
Well, the thing that's going to screw them over is the fact that if they just try to look out for their own conferences, which I get, like, that's their job, right? Obviously, you're just looking out for your own conferences. But if you're only looking out for your own conferences, it's going to destroy the product, right? Like, that's ultimately what the problem is the product gets destroyed when we only cater to the 2 big conferences. If they continue to kind of wrestle power away from each other, like you were saying, and they're just kind of like, no, it's me, right? I just think the issue there is going to be that the rest of college football is going to say, like, no, thanks. We will take our collective ball and go home, right? And I think a lot of people would be okay with that happening, right? If they said, like, okay, like, Big Ten, SEC, go do your thing, whatever. We're going to go do our own thing. I think the own thing that, like, the Big 12, ACC, all of the G6, like, all of them doing that together, I think that product would be a pretty good product that a lot of people would want to watch, because it would resemble a lot more of what college football should look like and maybe has looked like in the past. I don't know. At a certain point, I have no desire to even ask about what's happening in those little back rooms, because it's just guys trying to figure out how they can make 80 million instead of 60 million on a per school basis or something like that. I have no desire to even care about what those conversations look like. I just want to watch the games on the field. I want you to stop destroying the product. And again, like, we're talking about expansion for playoff and who gets an auto bid and who deserves this and who deserves that. Like, can I just famously remind everybody who would want to complain about Tulane not being a close game, with Ole Miss, or James Madison not standing up to Oregon? Like, reminder that SMU got throttled against Penn State last year. Reminder that Tennessee, the whole we're gonna go do we're take our stadium and our home field advantage north with us. Here we go.
AMU was way more competitive with Oregon than Tennessee,
and they got smoked. And then, like, the round after that, like, reminder, Oregon, thought to be the juggernaut, doesn't show up for their game against Ohio State. It's like, regardless of what we think might happen, and regardless of what the pictures might look like, and how he's, ooh, that picture, that's a nice matchup. That's really interesting. Like, you brought up what it would have looked like this year under those rules. You got 3 rematches in the first round. And oh yeah, by the way, I don't think Duke shows up to Autzen any better than James Madison does. I just don't think that game results in a close result anyways. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm totally dumb to say that. Again, we're playing the hypothetical game here. I don't think that for the people who are like, oh, it's not competitive, see, and then they just point to the G6, like, you had an SEC team get embarrassed at the shoe 2 years ago. That was it.
Got embarrassed at the Rose Bowl this year.
Yeah.
I mean, like, when you have a team that's just a juggernaut like Indiana was up until the championship game, it's hard to justify keeping other teams out on the basis of blowouts. And you can play the safety card if you want to. That stupid argument that came up around that time, but it's just really silly.
That's so dumb. And honestly, like,
even the NFL, Garrett,
teams, I was gonna say G6 teams shouldn't stand for that. Like, they shouldn't stand for that kind of slander against their teams.
Absolutely not. And yeah, last thing we'll say on the playoff here. I do think that, 12 going forward is good. I want to keep it at 12, 16 as maybe like a necessary evil to get rid of the buys. If we keep getting a sample size that the teams with a buy are disadvantaged, but for the love of God, please don't go to 24. We're not ready for a 24 team playoff.
There's not 24 teams worth putting in a playoff. Like, you're just watching a bunch of kind of okay, crappy football at that point.
Yeah. I don't need to see Miami beat somebody to earn the right to play at Texas A&M.
Yeah, because again, like, and the people that would compare it to the basketball tournament, reminder, there's 5 guys on the court at the same time. There's 11 guys on each side, so you're playing 10 total versus 22 total in terms of who's on the field and who you have to be able to field in terms of your guys. The talent disparity, the ability for one guy to make that much of a difference just by showing up on your team, maybe an interesting scheme type of thing. It all goes out the window for football. It's not the same game. It's not. That's not how that works. You got to have a lot more guys on the same page, a lot more talent working in congruence together. It's not the same thing as the basketball tournament. Don't tell me that, oh, they play 64 in basketball. It's fine. It's just not the same thing.
Well said. Well said. Let's move on to our other news topic here. Before we get into the portal superlatives, we'll talk about the dirty side of the portal. And Garrett, I have to ask you, have you gotten any calls from Pete Golding while you're teaching a class to maybe get a more lucrative offer somewhere else?
I'd like to formally not comment at this point in time. I'd like to keep that to myself. Okay.
Fair enough. But if you haven't been paying attention, Pete Golding and Ole Miss are kind of in some hot water, allegedly being investigated by the NCAA for whatever that's worth, because of some comments made by Dabo Swinney, who, Garrett, I just got to say, I feel kind of bad for Dabo Swinney. He finally decides to get busy in the portal, right? And gets a big commitment, right? Gets a nice linebacker from Cal, Luke Farelli. He's enrolled at Clemson, and then allegedly, according to Dabo Swinney, gets a text message while he's in class with a picture of $1 million contract offer saying, "What's your buyout from the Clemson contract that you've already signed?" So Luke Farelli is now an Ole Miss Rebel after having enrolled at Clemson and started the semester at Clemson. And we just found out a couple of days ago that now former Fresno State wide receiver Josiah Freeman is also being named, and the NCAA is interested in talking to Fresno State, who, quote, has the receipts about the tampering with Josiah Freeman. Is there anything that's going to come from this, or do you just feel like it's sour grapes about how the game is played these days?
Well, the NCAA is going to wag their finger extremely hard towards Ole Miss. And who would have thought, also, just by the way, who would have thought that it turns out Lane Kiffin wasn't the only issue with the Ole Miss Rebel? Like, who would have thought that, man? Pete Golding's got a little bit of nasty in him too. I don't like that, man. That's kind of gross. No, I don't like this, obviously. The thing that I think should be continued to be repeated is, if you've signed something, you probably have to honor it, right? The conversation was about before NIL, before the transfer portal, before all of that, the whole conversation was about like, oh, do we like even treat them like they have any rights? Like they're actually out there performing, and we just treat them like somehow scholarships are enough. And like, I get that. I'm sympathetic to that. Uh, the issue is now they've gone beyond what even like employment has the rights to. Like if you sign a contract to work somewhere for a certain period of time, you don't really get to opt out of that outside of like pretty massive circumstances, which, obviously like it's within the employer's best interest if they're contracting you to do something to make sure you finish your contract with them, especially if they've already paid money up front or have some sort of, buyout or whatever else. So I get it. Like, I understand that if you want to get out of a contract, if there are buyout clauses, like, okay, cool, great, whatever. At a certain point, like, I just can't really get behind it from a logistical standpoint of saying, I'm going to text a guy who's already enrolled somewhere else. He's sitting in class somewhere else. I'm going to text him and be like, hey, what's your buyout? I really think you should play football for me now. Because at that point, all the conversations we were having about like playoff teams being at a disadvantage because of the portal window, like why have a portal window at that point? You can just hop right back in and then come back to the other place just because it's kind of a joke at this point. And there's nothing the NCAA can do because they've been completely neutered. So it's going to come to actual probable congressional authority if we're going to get something like actually enforceable in place. That would have to do more with like contract law and actually how you like enforce contracts that are signed by players and things like that.
Well, yeah, here's how I could see this going down. Tampering by the NCAA rule book is either a level 1 or a level 2 offense, and those are the two highest offenses that you can have per the NCAA rule book. And I could see the NCAA stepping in, declaring a player ineligible, right? I could see them, giving sanctions to the team for doing that. But what's immediately going to happen is they're going to get sued, and a temporary injunction is going to be filed, and it's just going to start the domino effect of, well, we'll just let everybody play until we figure it out in court, and it's going to take way too long to figure it out in court. Yeah. So the people
and then the G League guys are playing basketball, and it's a whole thing.
Well, dude, that's a whole nother can of worms. And don't get me started on G League players playing college basketball. But I will sound like a 60-year-old ESPN boomer really quickly if we get down that track.
Yells at screen at ESPN. Not even any cloud anymore, just the ESPN screen.
I will turn into Tony Kornheiser and just immediately
okay,
be
fine.
a problem.
I got to see it now.
But listen, long story short, the NCAA, I don't think they really have a ground to stand on. Maybe they get fined. Maybe Ole Miss gets a fine and they just write the check and we just play on, similar to what happened to Michigan. I really don't see it being anything other than that. And we saw it with some other players too, right? We saw it with Darian Menza going from Duke to Miami after he allegedly had a 2-year deal with Duke, and Duke let him out and probably got some under the table money there. I think that could actually be a positive. If we see that start to trend, maybe we get some transfer fees like international soccer. I would love that. I think that would be really, really good. But then you have a guy like Damon Williams, who days after re-signing with Washington says, maybe I'll go down to LSU. Maybe I'll sign with the Tigers in Lane. And that's going to be a fascinating thing.
That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
Well, and now he has to George Costanza and come back to the meeting on Monday and say, I never left. So what are you guys talking about?
That's also kind of a weird power play for the player. Like once you've clearly and obviously told your team that you don't want to play for them, like it's just going to be a weird locker room situation for the coach anyways. You might as well let him out of his contract, right? It's kind of almost what the Mensa situation feels like. I don't know if that's how it actually went down, but like it felt like, okay, well now I don't want to be here anymore. So let me out because it's just going to be way too much drama if I stay, right? And the same thing with Williams too. Like it's if you've already declared, hey, I would like to leave, I would like to play somewhere else, please. And then they're like, no, you signed something. And they're like, well, bummer. Like they're not going to give you anything. You're not going to get a good product out of them. So you're not going to get their best performances. You're not going to get their best practices. It's just not going to be good for you as a team. You might as well move on. It's a weird power play dynamic for the players.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more of what we see in pro sports creeping into college sports by the day, and don't love it. I think we could solve a lot of it with some collective bargaining, but the question is, who are we collective bargaining with? Is it with the conferences? Is it with an NCAA that we've already decided is going to just get sued every time and we've set that precedent? Are we creating a new entity? There's just so many questions we have
It's
to
gotta
answer
be it's gotta be
before.
Sankey directly, right? Like, it's gotta be just him.
Jesus, no. Please no. We already talked about the egos with them too in the playoff segment, but man, well, write in. Let us know what your thoughts are on all of these developments. The playoffs staying at 12, tampering running rampant in college football. Let us know what you think at 3Tech Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Let us know in the comments, wherever you can comment, YouTube, Spotify, all that good stuff. Garrett, you want to talk about some actual team building and fun side of the transfer portal?
Well, we might as well, right? If we're gonna have this problem, we might as well get the fun out of it.
All right, well, let's do it. We got some portal superlatives here today, Garrett, and we're going to talk. We could get really in the weeds, I think, and I think there will be a time and place for that, especially in preview season. We can really break down these rosters and really talk about, hey, this team did a great job, filling out their offensive line. This team did a great job at improving their secondary, whatever that might be. I think here we want to just kind of go, not 30,000 feet. We'll jump in a little bit, but just kind of talk about who had the best classes, who really solved some specific problems, and then who are we really worried about as we sit here at the end of January already for next year. Let's start with the positives, though. Let's start with our best transfer class superlative. This is not necessarily the highest ranked, but maybe a combination of elite talent and actually making the team better. So I have some nominees here for you, Garrett, and you can take it any direction you want. You can pick one. You can just talk about each of them if you want, or you can throw me another one. I've got Indiana, LSU, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, and the Texas Longhorns up for best class superlative.
I think if you're just going to talk best class, I mean, it's Indiana, right? They got clearly better. I really like the tool that On3 has with the players going in, players going out. I think that's a really good tool. Right now, I'm looking at it right here on my other screen. Got Indiana at number 1, and their index score is at a 56. It's 5 points higher than the next best team, which is LSU. It's so bizarre, too, because we talked about it so much that they were doing what they were doing and they won the championship. They only had like 8 blue chips or whatever else. And we said, like, this will probably be the worst talent team that they've had during this little Signetti run that he's about to go on. The fact that they've already kind of turned it over and there's that many people that have seen that they want to go join up with the show and they want to go be a part of the whole thing. And they're going to finally start to put together some like real, like bona fide talent across the board, not just playmakers, not just like that's a role player guy, but like, hey, these are really tough to play against guys top to bottom. They could be even scarier next year. Absolutely love what Indiana's doing. I want to say best value. This is another one. They have the adjusted NIL value in terms of like what you're adding onto your books, what you're taking off your books. Shout out Texas A&M for adding as much as they did. They're number 4 right now on that little index. They have the 45 as their index score, only trailing Indiana, LSU, and Texas Tech. But if you look at what everybody else added, it says Indiana added 2.8 million. LSU really spent. They added 7.7 million. Texas Tech added 3.5 million. Texas A&M only adding a measly $108,000 in terms of NIL spending. I think there's a really big deal when you can get better across the board and not have to spend all that much to do it. I think Elko's doing a really good job building a roster. I don't think there's going to be a massive drop off at like maybe any position that they currently have on the roster. Really excited to see if they can kind of keep things going with the I don't want to say budget approach, but just the almost responsible roster building approach.
Yeah, just chump change, just a few $100K here and there.
Yeah, that's whatever.
Those values are interesting. I've heard a few people say that they are somewhere between like a guess and just pulling something out of their butts. Like, but it is. I think it is scaled. Like maybe the actual number isn't great, but the scale, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like
It gives you a reference of what's going on in terms of the competitiveness of the market.
Who's spending the most. I think they are valuable for that. Absolutely. But yeah, I think I agree with it's not even a money ball approach. It's just being smart with the resources that you have in College Station. Obviously we'll talk about Ken Coleman here in just a second, but we will and Texas, but I want to talk about Texas Tech, and I want to talk about our guy Raymond in the chat said this a while back, and I want to address it. Texas Tech is going to repeat 2025, crush that weak Big 12 conference, and get smoked by a real Power 4 team. So let's talk about Texas Tech. I actually think they did the best work in the portal. I think Texas Tech, you look at who they added, Austin Romine is maybe the best linebacker in the country that was available in the portal from Kansas State. They bolstered up the D-line with Mateen Ibari-Ogba. I hope I said his last name right, but he was a beast at Wake Forest. And then, of course, you get Brendan Sorsby out of the portal. Now, they missed on Cam Coleman. They missed out on the Cam Coleman sweepstakes, but Malcolm Simmons from Auburn isn't a bad consolation prize necessarily. And then you get maybe the best edge in the G5, maybe two of the best edges in the G5, and Adam Trick and Trey White from Miami, Ohio, and San Diego State. So the top end talent there for Texas Tech is what I'm really looking at. I think that they really did a great job of bolstering the top end talent of their team. The guys they lost, they might get bumped down just on the quantity of guys they lost. I think it was like a net brought in 21, lost 20 or something like that. But they didn't really lose anybody that I think they're losing sleep over. And that's huge when you're talking about team retention, when you're talking about just building a program that has staying power. So to address the part of getting smoked, when they play a real P4 team, am I saying that that's not going to happen? Absolutely not. Because if you look at their schedule next year, they are not going to be tested for the first 12 weeks of the season. They have nobody in the out of conference. They miss Utah. They miss BYU. They miss some of the other teams that are looking like they're going to be contenders in the Big 12 early on. They have a really, really clear path to an undefeated regular season, but they're going to have the depth and the top end talent to be right there. And if they can just get the quarterback play, Behren Morton, love the kid. He bleeds red and black. I think that Tech fans are going to look back on his time in Lubbock very, very fondly. But I think Brendan Sorsby, if he's healthy, can just up that quarterback play exponentially. And that could be what really unlocks the next level of production for Texas Tech and maybe helps them win a playoff game this time.
Yeah, Texas Tech is really interesting, and I'm curious to see what direction we go when we kind of break them down this offseason, because I think, and I'm not sure that I'm 100% on this, but I think if you were to look back on Tech and the way that they built their roster, I think you would say that this was the year that they took a step forward at a couple position groups so much that they could dominate the Big 12, right? They had a couple things that went right. The D-line was extremely good. Linebacker room was really good. But you're right. Like, the quarterback didn't quite take that step. Their receiver room was maybe leaving a little bit to be desired. And, maybe the running back, I know they had the injury at the beginning of the year, so that kind of sucks, but, maybe could get a little bit more explosive at the running back spot. I'm curious to see if they can keep adding enough playmakers at enough different positions, right? I think you're totally right about Sorsby. I think Simmons is a super under the radar guy that we're going to be talking about a lot next year as kind of the primary go-to, because he's as good as they get. Obviously, the Cam Coleman being the elite number one obvious, guy. Simmons is, not to be overshadowed in that conversation. I know he's coming from Auburn as well. Simmons is a very good receiver. And so I'm curious to see if they've done enough. I'm not sure that they've quite done enough to maybe make a championship run next year. I'm not sure they've done enough to compete with the best possible programs out there, take Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, all those big time programs. And I guess maybe some guys in the SEC too, kind of afterthought over here. But I think they're going to be able to compete a lot better this year. They're going to crush the Big 12. I mean, I'm pulled up their schedule. They've got their biggest out of conference test is
Oregon State, right?
Oregon State on the road, which I guess that could get weird in Corvallis. That it's possible. But yeah, I mean, in conference, Arizona is the toughest team on their schedule.
Yeah, no Fafita coming back.
I would say TCU, but they lost Hoover. I would say Baylor, but they kind of suck.
DJ Lagway, maybe. DJ Lagway.
Oklahoma State Oklahoma State, maybe the fighting mean green of the fighting, black and orange or whatever.
Bill Conley had him in his way too early playoff prediction.
that's bolder than bold. So I don't know if I'd go that far, but yeah, there's just not a lot of proven teams, I think, on this schedule that will be enough of a threat to Texas Tech. So I think Texas Tech is probably primed to go undefeated again, just cruise through the Big 12. The big thing will be, can they stay healthy? Can they develop their players enough in their system so that when it comes time for the playoff, they can actually put up a better fight this time?
Yeah. Well, speaking of top end talent, I want to talk real quickly about the Texas Longhorns here. If you are a Texas fan stumbling upon this, we will be doing a deeper look at Texas with someone who covers the team a little bit later in the offseason. So we'll just kind of go 30,000 feet here because I do want to talk about just their strategy. I'm not going to name them the best class necessarily because I'm really just very intrigued to see how this plays out. We talked about Moneyball with some other teams. Texas kind of did the opposite. Texas is going all in on the very top end talent. And you saw some of their insiders in the middle of the portal window kind of saying that, hey, we want this to be kind of NFL-esque, right? We want to really go all in on a two deep, get the best possible two deep possible. Again, that's not me saying this. This is people that cover the team that were reporting on that. And if that's the strategy, I think they did that pretty well, right? Cam Coleman, Melvin Sinai, sorry, from Wake Forest, Hollywood Smothers, and Raleek Brown in the backfield. Those are some big names that they got out of the transfer portal. I am really interested to see how it plays out because going all in on the very top of the roster is just so different than pretty much every other team has done it. And it could work. I'm not sitting here in January saying it's not going to work. It does feel like a very big shift from their previous strategy though, because last year their fan base was really kind of upset that they didn't go all in on the portal and was relying on some younger talent that didn't work out for them until that talent kind of started to gel at the end of the year. 9-3 is a little below the standard of what they're expecting in Austin, but how do you analyze a class like this? Because they did lose a lot. They lost a lot of guys that I think they were counting on eventually preparing, but they replaced the very top end of that. And I don't think you can argue that they're going to have one of, if not the most talented starting 11s on both sides of the ball in the country.
I agree with you, and I think you probably the hard part is you could probably have said that this year too, right? Like I think this year, if you're just talking pure talent, the Texas Longhorns were kind of the same, right? Like I think if you're looking at, like how was Wingo going to produce? I mean, we saw how good he was the year before when he wasn't the primary option, but how good was he going to produce as the primary? I think he underwhelmed a little bit, right? I don't think he quite lived up to what a lot of Longhorn fans were hoping he would be. I know that there are a lot of conversations about, how are things going to go with the running back room? And, Wisner had been so good for them. He didn't quite have the year. I know he kind of battled some injuries early on and, wasn't quite healthy, didn't quite, get to where he wanted to be until the end of the year. But still, I think they've improved at, a lot of the positions they're at. I was very impressed, obviously, getting Cam Coleman. It's a big deal. When you pull off, obviously 2-star running backs, you're definitely going to be better at running the football. That was a huge struggle for them this year. They could not run the football effectively. They're going to do a lot better. I'm curious, though, Trey, you mentioned the idea that they were just going to rely on talent this last year on offense. They've kind of flipped that this year on the defensive side. I think a lot of the conversation about the defensive side of the football for Texas is, well, we just have so much talent anyways. All those guys are going to get replaced by 5-stars, and that's going to be fine. Maybe it works better this year, but you're also turning over your defensive coordinator. And those are guys that maybe need a little bit more reps, maybe need a little bit more time in a new system, guys that are having to find a way to kind of make it work now all of a sudden. Again, they have plenty of talent. And if the Texas defense is good this next year, that's not going to shock me. But if the Texas defense underwhelms this year, similarly to how kind of the Texas offense did this year, that also would be an outcome that I wouldn't be necessarily surprised by. So curious to see just how much better this offense can get, kind of how high is the sky if the sky is the limit. Can they go to outer space, and is that going to be good enough to end up getting them over the hump? I know a lot of people hoping they can go all in with Arch and Hope that he can be good enough with everything else that's around him now improving. Again, it looked great on paper going into the season this year. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Let's transition over to our next superlative. Let's talk about the best fix. This is a position group, Paul, that could solve a problem and cause a team to make a big jump. We talked about the Texas running backs there. I won't go too deep into there. I want to talk about the Cal defense, Garrett, and that is a class that I feel like when I was just scrolling Twitter during the portal window, every time I'd think like, man, that's a nice little pickup. I'll look at who it is on the graphic and it's Cal, right? They're just out there being snipers. Tosh Lupoi obviously getting his shot to be a head coach, but it's not necessarily guys that are going to just like jump off the page at you from a name standpoint, but they're getting guys from big time programs, right? They're getting Daniel Harris coming over from Georgia. That's a borderline 4-star recruit. Kamar Mathudi from Oregon following Tosh Lupoi down. They got a lot of players coming down that were maybe not necessarily getting playing time in Oregon. These are guys that obviously these big time programs wanted to take a stab at when they were coming out of high school. I'm really interested to see if Tosh Lupoi, his defensive minded team, can put that all together in a good, just get a good unit. For as long as they had a defensive coach under Justin Wilcox, their defense sucked for so long, and that really held them back. You think about their team that had Fernando Mendoza on the roster last year, and they couldn't translate that. And then he gets on a different team. It's a whole nother story. Other nominees for you, I've got the Houston offensive line. Loved what they did in the portal to protect Connor Wigman. Notre Dame wide receivers, just taking the guys that got tired of sitting behind future NFL first rounders at Ohio State, and they're going to plug them right into the lineup. And the Kentucky offensive line as well with their new investment at quarterback. Anybody else kind of stand out to you? Or you want to dive in on any of those?
I know we kind of just talked about it, but I love what Texas did at the running back position.
Yeah.
I think they just dominated that. It's hard to get a big time running back to show up anyways. When you get two of them, like, hats off to you, right? You get two guys who can both be lead backs, two guys who can both do a lot of things right. Both guys who were super productive at their previous stops. Again, hats off to Texas for doing that. And again, like, they struggled to run the football a lot last year. I'm a big fan of Trey Wisner. I think that he's a really good running back. And yet they still just could not find a way to run the football with him. Now, if they all of a sudden show up and can't run the football, we got some questions about the Texas offensive line. But I don't think that that'll be the case. I think they're going to be a lot better, and they're going to do a really good job, again, creating in space, like finding a way to do what they need to on the ground. And if that can get going, along with, Arch kind of coming back and getting another year of experience, like, this could be a really scary offense when you add real balance to that backfield. So I absolutely love that. Again, you talked about the Cal defense, love that. And I love, again, hiring the Oregon guy. He's coming down. He's got the defensive bona fides. I think this is going to be really good for them.
Yeah, both Oregon coordinators were kind of killed it in the portal, and that's where I want to go next. The sleeper class. We can go to individual players maybe towards the end here, Garrett, if we have time. But my nominees for the sleeper class are Kentucky and Cal. Those are the first two. The Oregon coordinators taking over their respective programs and doing a really, really bang up job in the portal. I also like what Arizona State did quietly in the portal after they lost Sam Leavitt. That could send you in a spiral, but you go get Cutter Boley. You go get him a couple weapons in the wide receiver core. I don't hate it. I really don't. And then Oklahoma State and Penn State for different reasons, right? They are now the Oklahoma State Mean Green and the Penn State Cyclones, just importing rosters with their new coaching hires. But I really like what all of these classes have done, even if they're not ranked towards the top of like the industry rankings.
Yeah, I love what Kentucky did. I think Kentucky is one of those teams that you want to get early next year, because I think when Kentucky starts to get it rolling, we might be talking about Kentucky having a dang football team. That's really exciting to talk about too, because, man, it just feels like they have not been able to put together a good product outside of, like, there's like a 1 year every now and then when they have like a transcendent player. Does Kentucky actually field a good football team, right? Every other year, it's just back to the bottom and you're not going to be that good. And finally, they're going to get someone who can commit to this and who's actually caring about like improving the program, and he's hungry and he wants it. Love Will Stein as the hire. And I love what they did. I mean, Kenny Minchey, the quarterback, they're going to, just sell out for him being the guy. But you get CJ Baxter, you get Nick Anderson, you get some of those guys too. Like, they brought in talent to put around him. Is it going to be enough to win the SEC? No, like, I don't think so. If Kentucky wins the SEC this year, you can come back and clip me. I don't care. There's no shame in me saying that right now. Kentucky ain't winning the SEC. Is Kentucky going to make a bowl game? Yeah, I think so. I think Kentucky's going to make a bowl game. Is Kentucky going to win some games they probably shouldn't next year? Yeah, probably. Is Kentucky going to jump up and snag somebody and ruin a season? I wouldn't be shocked, right? Like, I think this is a Kentucky team that is very, very, I'm not going to say good, but I'll say moving in the right direction. I think they're really improving. And I think that as time goes on and as this program gets to kind of, get its footing, I think this is going to be a team that we're talking about. So yeah, this, year one class, it seemed like for me with, Kentucky, you would see like a Twitter post of a guy who committed to Kentucky and you go, whoa, that's a big deal. Wow, good for Kentucky. But then you kept seeing it and you're like, whoa, is Kentucky for real? Like, are they really doing this? And so I think, yeah, with 1 year, they're turning this thing around. They're getting pretty serious, and I'm thrilled for them and their fans.
And it looks like they're just very intentional with who they're bringing in, right? It is very much to run Will Stein's offense, to, be part of that new culture that they're building in Lexington. It's another team that I think they're lower on the rankings, especially with what On3 does because of how much they lost with a coaching change. But they're upgrading their total talent and their production from what we've seen. And I'm really interested to see how that works out. Want to just plug Arizona State real quick. I mentioned them earlier. You lose Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson. You think, man, maybe we need to pack it in for next year, really adjust our expectations. And you go get Cutter Boley from Kentucky, who was like one of the very few bright spots on that Wildcat team last year. He's going to be thrown to Omarion Miller and Reed Harris from Colorado and Boston College. I love those two pickups from two very underachieving teams. This was an Arizona State team that was still right in the thick of the Big 12 championship race to the very end of the season. They had a path on the last week of the season, even without Sam Leavitt playing for most of the year. So excited to see what they can do in that kind of rebuilt, retooled offense. Garrett, let's go to our if there's any, real quick, before we go to the negative side of things, are there any individual players that you want to give a shout out that you're just really excited to see in their new home?
I want to say this, and it's kind of cheating because it's kind of the last thing that we were talking about too. There's a reason I didn't really bring him up that much. I love the fit for Drew Mestemaker and Caleb Hawkins both going to Oklahoma State. You get to stay with your head coach. First of all, the job that Oklahoma State does to bring those two guys in, I don't know what they had to give them in NIL. I don't know what they had to promise them in terms of guarantees. The job to get both of those guys up there, I think, is huge. And the fact that you're going to get to keep those two guys together, keep a lot of guys from UNT that are coming up there. Like, we were joking, it's the Oklahoma State Mean Green. But it's going to be really cool to watch what I think is a program that should succeed year in and year out. Like, there's no reason Oklahoma State shouldn't be good in the Big 12, right? They're right there in the middle of the country, and a lot of recruiting hotbeds all around them. Right next to Texas, you should be able to get talent there. Having a guy who's connected into the DFW Metroplex, obviously, like through UNT and through some of those recruiting efforts, having a guy who can jump in there is going to be huge for them. But I love the fit for Mestemaker and Hawkins both getting to stay with their coach, getting to run that offense back one more time. It's going to be a lot of points at Oklahoma State this year.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what they can do in the Big 12. They are an early sleeper candidate for me, for sure. He had a lot of drama around him, but I think that getting a guy like Jordan Seaton at LSU is going to be really great for Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, that's huge.
I'm excited to see LSU, not as an opponent, as a fan of someone that's going to play them this year, but I'm excited for them to actually have an offensive line. That's going to be a really nice change of pace for their fans after this year. Damon Wilson was kind of slept on at Missouri this year. He was a big part. Zion Young kind of got all the press, and he's going to go pretty high in the NFL draft in a couple months. But Damon Wilson was really good opposite him for Missouri this year. He's going to go replace Ruben Bain and just kind of plug and play in Miami. So don't expect that pass rush for the Hurricanes to drop off too much, even with some of the guys they're really losing in the draft. We could name dudes for 2 hours, but I want to talk. We've done a lot of positive talk. We do need to talk about the other side of the transfer portal. And there are certainly, extenuating circumstances that might cause you to have a very concerning class. Obviously, places like Iowa State and North Texas. We just joked about, North Texas losing their whole team to Oklahoma State and Iowa State to Penn State. Obviously, we don't really want to dunk on them too much, but I have a few schools that I want to highlight of, are we a little concerned, right? Are we just concerned, just looking on the surface, not insiders to the program, not necessarily knowing what they have in the room that they were already happy with, but just from the outside looking in, are we a little concerned about what these teams did or didn't do in the transfer portal? I've got 4 for you. I've got Alabama, Auburn, USC, and Nebraska. Alabama and Auburn first kind of bled players. They were losing guys left and right that I think other schools were very excited to get. They would want them to be part of their school. I'm thinking about Cam Coleman. I'm thinking about Isaiah Horton. I'm thinking about, just a bevy of talented players from both of those two teams, both of those rivals. USC, I'm wondering if they're making the same mistake Texas did last year of going all in on a top freshman class that just may or may not be ready to jump in and contribute and take them to the next level. That's kind of what the Longhorns got bit by last year, tied a lot of money up into a number 1 freshman class, and it led to a 9-3 season. And I'd wonder what that's going to be at USC with a lower overall talent level. And then Nebraska. The biggest problem this year is they couldn't keep their quarterback straight. It got Dylan Raiola hurt. Dylan Raiola's gone. I don't necessarily think that's the biggest loss, but they only brought in 3 offensive line commitments and just 1 tackle. So I'm wondering if they did enough. Any thoughts there? Any additions to that list, or do you want to go deeper on one of those 2 teams? Or tell me I'm wrong and you have a different take.
I think when we talk about concerning classes, I'm going to reframe USC. I'm not concerned with their class. I'm just concerned with their program. I don't trust, anything about that program. They're going to need a change in head coach before I can trust that the program is going to be run well. Nebraska, maybe a little bit concerned, right? Didn't seem like the growth was where they needed it to be. We like to talk about, Rule being a program builder. It didn't quite build as much as we were maybe hoping it to. Auburn, I'm not really worried. I mean, it's a coaching change, so, you got to let him get in. We might need to see a proof of concept before we really judge what Auburn's doing. I'm worried about Alabama. I think Alabama by far had the worst of what you could expect. Trey, I was scrolling through this On3 little rankings because I was like, oh, yeah, what did happen with Alabama? Let me kind of refresh myself. I had to scroll for a little while before I got to Alabama's ranking. According to On3, they're ranked as the 46th portal class at a -5 on their index. They got worse, according to On3. They let too much talent walk out the door for what they brought in. I don't know where Alabama fans maybe would say that that's wrong. I'm kind of looking at some of this. Like, you lost big-time playmakers. You lost guys that should be contributing on your offensive line, on your defensive line, and your linebacking core. Like, you're losing guys that should matter. I don't know where Alabama fans go at this point in terms of, kind of hope for the future. I know that they were kind of out, obviously with the Florida State loss. They were out on DeBoer. They were ready to, throw him. That people were talking about winning the lottery last fall and paying his buyout. Like that was pretty famous, clip on Twitter there. But now we're talking about, okay, like, you just got embarrassed by Indiana. Grant, okay, yeah, it's Indiana, team of destiny, whatever. But you got embarrassed. Like, you got your butt handed to you. After a year of times when physicality was an issue, times where, not being able to kind of like put up in those big moments and find the tough yards, stop the run, like those are problems for Alabama at times this year. you didn't get better in any way, shape, or form. I think you got worse in a lot of ways. And I think there's a lot of hope and a lot of, yeah, maybe, new quarterback could help some. Yeah, maybe if there's like a freshman or maybe guys come back and play a little bit better. I don't know where the hope is right now for Alabama fans. I think you can expect Alabama to take a step back. That's a bad place to be when a lot of the SEC just took a step forward, right? Texas took a step forward. Obviously A&M took a big step forward this year. Ole Miss took a step forward this year. LSU, I think, took a step forward hiring a new coach. Georgia, I think, got better. Like all the teams that are kind of underneath, kind of in that next like lower tier down. You think about, Florida, new coach, Auburn, new coach, like, Kentucky, we just talked about them. They're going to get a lot better. If you're Alabama, like, I mean, where's the hope right now? I don't see it if I'm Alabama.
It's just been such a roller coaster, man, for the last 5 or 6 months, I guess. You lose to Florida State in blowout fashion. Then you reel off a ton of wins, just gritty, find a way to win against very talented teams. You just maybe have one of the best strength of records in the country. And then ever since that Oklahoma loss, ever since that kind of fluky first Oklahoma loss, it's just been really, really toxic down there. And I don't know what that's going to translate to. I still think Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. I think it might not be the best situation for him necessarily with needing time and following the legend that he's following in Nick Saban, but I don't think he forgot how to coach. I don't think that the guy that's taken Washington and taken lower division teams to championship levels has just forgotten how to coach. So very interested to see how year 3 goes. Don't think it's off to a great start, but they do have a lot of internal talent that they can turn to hopefully take over some of those roles. We'll see. That hasn't necessarily been the path for a championship level team the last few years with as Wild West as the portal has been. Well, but it's certainly from the outside looking in, you can start to see the cracks in the foundation.
And you mentioned the talent level, like that's kind of what Bama was able to do for so long was, Nick Saban was just such a bona fide coach. If you were anybody, you wanted to go play at Bama, right? And so you could get the best guys. There were sometimes they would trot out teams. You just looked at the guys. You're like, yeah, I don't know what you're supposed to do here, right? Like, remember those like 4 receivers for a little while when you had like Waddle and Judy, and I mean they're unstoppable. I mean, I even saw a thing recently where I think it was, Derrick Henry talking about like who was the best running back in the Saban era. And he was like, oh, Mark Ingram, he did it first. So that was like a really big thing. Like, no, it was you. And I'm just like, did we forget that like Trent Richardson was a guy? Like they just had so many guys at Alabama for so long that I think the problem is when the talent starts to drop, it doesn't even have to drop to like unacceptable levels of the roster. But when it starts to drop, you got to start asking questions, right? You got to ask questions about like, well, what is your roster? How are you not able to retain these players? If you really are a competent coach, how are you not able to keep winning here at the level that we were winning? And I get it. He's not Saban. And we told Bama fans, like, you're going to have to get used to that. I didn't think that meant that they were going to, fail to really do anything in the playoffs for several years in a row now. Like, Bama hasn't been a real competitor. If we're being honest, Bama has not really competed for a title since Saban left. And that kind of sucks because the talent that they've had on the roster, the way the roster was constructed, the team that was handed to a coach who had just coached in the national championship game, that team was a very good team that they handed him. I think it's just kind of getting worse every year.
Yeah, it's not looking good. Maybe they can consult with Nate Oates about getting a guy from an NFL practice squad or the UFL or something.
Does Trent Richardson still have any eligibility?
Listen, they could do a lot of things and get a friendly judge to write an injunction. And
how's Sean Alexander doing? Is he still kicking it?
Oh man, get Greg McElroy out of the booth.
Yeah, come on now.
A little bit.
Pride of South.
Garrett, I think that's a good place to call it for today. We're almost right at an hour. Transfer portal window is closed. Still some fallout from that to track. We'll be on it. Mitch is working on a really special insider episode, hopefully for next week. We're crossing our fingers that can get done. But if not, we'll have some other awesome content for you. And like I said, we are going to be doing some team deep dives coming up on the channel real soon, in addition to our written content, our social content. Off season does not mean we are going away for a few months. I know we went into hibernation for a week or so to ride out this storm, but we're back. We can expect a full episode at least once a week, and then some bonus ones sprinkled in here and there throughout the offseason. Then before we know it, we'll be in previews in June and July once again. But Garrett, I think we'll call it there for today. For my partner Garrett Turney and Mitch Mason, I'm Trey Reeves.